right, let's get started. We have a very interesting topic today, so don't want to wait any longer. Thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to today's webinar, Bridging Cyber and Physical Defenses, a unified approach to securing every angle. I'm Kelly Pugh, and I'll be your host for this session. Before we begin, here are a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to all registrants afterwards. To submit questions, please use the Q&A feature. We'll address as many as possible during the Q&A segment at the end. If you experience technical issues, please use the chat function to contact with our support team. Now let's dive into today's topic. Recent studies reveal that 82% of organizations have faced cyber attacks stemming from third-party access, yet 63% admit to limited understanding of these physical breaches. With the rise of interconnected systems and IoT, the distinction between physical and cyber threats is fading fast. Convergence is the key to a stronger security posture. Before we dive into much of today's content, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Jeff DiDomenico, who will guide us through the session and introduce each of our speakers. Jeff brings a wealth of knowledge and energy to the conversation, and we're excited to have him lead us through what promises to be an engaging and insightful webinar. Jeff, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you for joining our first webinar, at least your first webinar, and our first one for the year. Always a privilege and an honor to be able to host guests that I have a great relationship with and help learn and teach me things about our industry, where we're going, and how we can help. And so that's exciting always for me. You can tell I'm not the copywriter because I wanted to rename this Death, Taxes, and Cybersecurity Threats. So thankfully, I don't wear that hat. My two guests, one I think third-time member, Eddie Sorrells, president of DSI, longtime client friend and certainly a leader in our industry. And Tim, I want to come clean. I know we had this conversation prior to calling Canada the 51st state and prior to tariff conversation. So there's no diplomatic mission for me here. It is completely picking the best person to provide some value to our clients today. So thank you again. We'll start with Tim. A great background, both in physical and cyber. I'll let you do the honors and talk a little bit about yourself and what you hope to be able to share with our guest today.
Oh, thanks so much, Jeff. I appreciate it. I didn't have my elbows up T-shirt on today, so I'll leave it off for a bit. So for the audience, hi folks. My name is Tim McCreight. I'm the CEO and founder of TaleCraft Security. My wife had to remind me, this is year 44 now in security. So I started when I was 12. That's when we started up here in Canada. So it's been a terrific career. I've been very privileged. I've had the opportunity to work both in physical security as I started my career as a guard in Winnipeg, Manitoba in 1981 when I got out of the Air Force. And I had a chance to move into cybersecurity. And I've been privileged to hold the role of Chief Information Security Officer for a number of companies around the globe. Thanks, Jeff.
Great. Excellent. Eddie, please, I know it's your third time, but I don't get tired of hearing it. Please give us a little background and your security story.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. And first of all, thanks to you and the Trackforce Valiant team for having this important webinar. And, we're going to dive in today a lot of important topics, but wanted to start a little bit with my background and talk about the fact that I am not a cybersecurity expert. That's what we have Tim here for. And Tim's a good friend. I love to hear his background and his story for a couple of reasons. It shows the wealth of knowledge that he has. But he's one of the few guys that have been doing it longer than me, but looks much better than I do. I'm not sure how that's possible, but I started with DSI. Yeah, I started with DSI Security Services 34 years ago, actually this month, and I've spent my entire career on the physical security side, starting as a security officer. I've filled roles, whether it's armed or unarmed, been doing consulting, management, really looking at all risk through a certain prism of physical security. So my career is now taking a different stage. It's taking a different approach where we're having to look at other risks that we didn't think we were going to have to tackle. But certainly cyber is part of that. So look forward to digging into this and glad to be here with my good friend Tim and you as well, Jeff.
Great, super. So this next slide is really designed to make sure that I took my ADHD medication. They stay online, which is so simple for me to do. So I don't know why they instructed me to specifically talk about the things we're going to be talking about today. But no, I've had a lot of practice sessions. I'm ready to go. It's exciting. I remind our viewers, and thank you to all of you for attending, and those that couldn't, we'll make sure that you get some access to this information too. But truly, what we'll leave here with is not only the reasons as to why you need to be mindful of this business opportunity, but actually preparing you with very specific tactics and strategies and what next movement. So it's not a lofty discussion about why it exists and how it crosses over, but actually a very in-depth discussion around specific areas which your company might already be engaged in. So I'm looking forward to diving in as well. Next slide. You know, everyone has a moment in time that there is an event that happens that spurs us to maybe scratch our head and think. And for me, it was part of my 2021 150-50. You might hear me refer to that. It's my goal every year for the last 10 years to speak to 150 CEOs in 50 weeks in our industry. Much easier to do during COVID, as I had greater access to have to physically leave. But the reality was on May 7th that year, the Colonial Pipeline event happened. And I just happened to be doing my call outs for a couple of companies that were in the Southeast. And I didn't realize that 5,500 miles of pipeline had been shut down. I didn't realize that there was a ransomware attack that was going to cost a company $4.4 million in Bitcoin. None of that meant anything to me. To me, it was how should we react? What is it that our customers were doing? So in that call out, I was really amazed at people that were like, no, that's the cyber side. That's not us. A couple did say, yeah, we're getting these inbound calls for people that want armed guards at the gas stations. Aha, a seminal crossover moment. So to me, that was the moment in time at which I started to pay closer attention to what cyber meant and how it might affect our customers and what we might be able to do about it. So that's the cornerstone to me today of what we're going to have to accomplish. I think I mentioned to Tim and to Eddie before we started, we all have these personal items that hit us on the cyber side, whether it's your IRS tax season, we're going to get these fake click-throughs to process your tax returns horribly when they take advantage of things like the LA fires. Please donate your money, those opportunities. I think we're all subject to what that looks like. Sometimes we don't necessarily take that back to the office, but that's something we're going to be doing for certain today. So with that, I want to start really, Eddie, with you in terms of, next slide, please, in why we're even talking about it. What seminal moment was it for you? When did you cross over? Was it customer driven? Was it a personal event? Tell me a little bit about that. And then Tim will counteract with, you knew it the whole time. You've been preaching it. You've built a company around it. So we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And again, there are so many personal moments, so many moments we've seen on the worldwide stage we're all aware of, but there are a lot of moments also when it comes to day in and day out operations that have really forced me to recognize that cybersecurity is no longer just a problem for the IT professionals. You know, for a lot of years, we were able to sort of comfort ourselves by saying that that's an IT issue, that's something that the chief information technology officer is going to handle for us, or a third-party vendor. And certainly when it comes to our customers as physical security providers, we certainly don't have any awareness or responsibility to really go into that world. So that really has been a rapid change. You know, we were talking in preparation for this webinar about all the things that we get. You just referenced some of the phishing attacks that we get. And I'm old enough to remember where that was very rare. You would get one, every couple of months maybe, and you would stare at it and go, well, that's obviously fake. Now
Right.
we probably get, 10 or 15 a day.
Right.
And those are the ones that we see. That many are filtered out through some type of IT system. But really where it cemented in my mind was a couple of different situations. I was out on the West Coast working with some of our managers about 2 years ago, and we were securing a large distribution center where part of our responsibilities is we were logging into the customer's gate system, where we're logging in trucks, we're scanning barcodes, we're making sure the right trucks are going out, the right trucks are coming in. And just coincidentally, as we were pulling up to visit our customer, the manager that I was with got a phone call and said, hey, just FYI, we have a little bit of an issue. They all log into this system and they have the same password, but they change the password every now and then. And
Right.
we had a gentleman who just left. It was not adversarial, but he resigned and went on to other employment. And the problem was that he changed the password, but he didn't tell anybody. So the other officers were not able to log into the system, and the customer was asking us, can you get in touch with this person and find out what the new password is? And we've already established I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but the way my mind works, as we're sitting in this car, I turned to the manager and I said, let me ask you a very important question. Our former employee is the only one that has access to the system that controls the logistics of this huge facility. And he paused for a minute and he said, yeah, I guess you're right. My next question was, can he log in remotely? And as the shock sort of came over his face and the enormity of the question hit him, he said, yeah, he can, but I hope he would not do that. And I remember thinking to me that cybersecurity is so important, it can't be built on hope.
Right.
So what we have to make sure that we're accomplishing as physical security professionals is we're responsible for all risks that we're entrusted with. Doesn't mean we're experts in that field, but a cyber breach can start with a physical action or an inaction. Or it can be just something as simple as we have someone that doesn't even work for us anymore that has access to a network that could shut the customer down.
Right.
And so we have to recognize that physical security professionals have not only a role, but a responsibility to play as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. Tim, please, this is right in your wheelhouse.
I tried not to cringe too much in that story. I hope it didn't show. No, and Eddie brings up some great points, and a couple of things. One, there was this moment I had. It was a few years ago. Hopefully, folks remember when Home Depot was breached.
Yes.
That was a little while ago,
Yep.
but it was breached because they were the third-party team that was managing their HVAC systems was breached, and then they jumped from the HVAC company over to Home Depot because there was an established connection that was trusted between one party and the other.
Right.
So folks here on on the webinar today, I hope everyone, if you draw from this a couple of things, one would be as working as a physical security professional, if you're gaining access to your clients' systems, sites, card access systems, CCTV, et cetera, you are now part of their risk management program. Whether you understand it or not, you are part of it. It's because you're gaining access now, just like Eddie had mentioned. You now have access to a system that the client requires to operate every day. You need to access it yourself to do work to help the client out and reduce their risks. But now you're part of the equation. Right. So the question becomes, what are you doing as an organization to make sure you're living up to that part of the bargain? How are you ensuring that your systems are secure, that you're training your folks, and that you're looking at your risk program? Because you're part of it now. And for me, that was a big leap because it's changed my approach and my understanding of third-party risk management from that one onward. Because how many of you right now, when you go to your client site, access the client systems, look at their video, access their card access, and are you doing it on your company laptop, accessing a client's systems? Then what are you doing to protect your space that you're occupying now?
It seems so clear when you both explain it. Like, of course, how come I didn't think of that? But we'll get into the reasons why we haven't. Next slide, please. So, when I first started in this business, which was 99, great guy, great mentor, worked advanced security. His name was Obi Moore. And Obi came to me and he said, this business is really super simple. I go, what's that? Guards, guns, and gates. It's just so simple. And that made a lot of sense to me. I could understand it. I could physically touch it. Obviously, the world has transitioned much from that. And so as we go from the guards, guns, and gates to managing risk, Eddie, tell me, because your company has obviously made this leap over to providing other risk mitigation services other than that of man guarding. So if you could just take us into that process and how that the underpinning has been this relationship with cyber as well.
Yeah, if you look back over the past 30 plus years, and the guards, guns, and gates is something I've been hearing about since I started in this industry. And I've had several people, thankfully not lately, but certainly early in my career, would sort of term our profession as we're just order takers. We're just a staffing agency. Someone calls up and says, I need 2 unarmed officers, position one here, position another one there. I've been privileged to have a front row seat to the evolution where we are now risk owners. And Tim mentioned enterprise security risk management. He's one of the pioneers of that methodology. And that really is evolving to the point where, as physical security providers, we have to really own the entire risk and be partners. And again, that doesn't mean that we're going to have solutions for every risk, but we have to have an awareness of how we impact that risk.
Right.
One of the analogies that I use when it comes to cybersecurity is safety. Now, I'm not a safety expert either. If we keep talking, there'll be a long list of things I'm not an expert of. But if someone was to call me today and says, "Is this Eddie Sorrells, the preeminent safety expert?" I would say, "Whoa, whoa, you got the wrong guy." But imagine if I went to a prospect or a customer tomorrow and said, "We have no responsibility for safety at your site. That's
Yeah.
not my problem. If my officers get injured, hey, that's on you." Of course, I would be laughed out of the room if I'm lucky. So we have to own that. We have to own that safety culture. The same thing with cyber. Tim brought up a great point about accessing our customers' systems.
Mhm.
Everything is now IP connected. We don't see any access control, obviously video. I grew up in the days where part of my job when I first got on post was I would change the VHS tapes out and I
Yeah.
would put the date on them.
Yeah.
Now everything is connected. So when a customer says, "Here is an email address on my domain," I take the responsibility very seriously that now I'm adding to your risk profile.
Right.
If I don't have that strategy, and if I'm not part of your cyber defense, I could be part of your cyber vulnerability. So the way the industry is trending, our customers are going to be looking to partner with us, not just to provide solutions. That's when I call guys like Tim to say, "Hey, how do I better protect the infrastructure internally and externally?" But you have to be a willing partner at the table, and we can no longer say, "Whoa, that's a tech problem. That's your chief information officer's problem. That's IT." We have to be a willing partner.
Yeah, that's great. Tim, tell us a little bit here. This is where we're going to go from, okay, we're all believers now. We understand, we see where the crossover is. We're believers. What's next? Tell me about how this evolution in both in your personal career side, where the light bulb went off, and then what can people start to think about as next steps?
No, good question. And thanks, Jeff. And Eddie kind of teed up a few things for me. So let me pull a couple of threads. So I've, as you see on the screen, this idea that by this year, the theory is a lot of these organizations that you will be working with as your clients are going to create this chief security officer role, or where they're combining the physical and cyber under one roof. So I've lived that space for a number of years in a number of different organizations. And the most fascinating thing for me is I challenge my teams to work together. So here's a quick example. I was at municipal government here as the chief security officer, and I ensured that my cyber and physical team members, who both reported into me, would actually work together on risk assessments for new facilities or for new programs, new applications, new websites. And everyone thought I was nuts, and I think probably some still do, and that's fine. I'm okay with it. One of the things I learned, though, is the mindset change when you start getting people to look at risk at a strategic level, at an ESRM level, at an organization or enterprise level. It changes your perspective on the role that you play to reduce that risk. So the example that I provided, which is physical and cyber coming together to do a risk assessment, the quality of work when they actually work together and combine forces to look at risks from the two different lenses, wow, it was amazing to see the change, to see the mindset change and the work that these folks were doing. That really impressed me. It was something that I have continued to do in my career throughout. In fact, the clients I'm working with today, I still ask physical security questions if we're doing cyber work as well. Eddie brought up a great point. You are now part of an overarching risk program at your client's site, at your client's organization, and in their systems. It means you have to have that same perception when you come into work every day. You have to look at the risks from that lens. That's where, for me, the biggest change has been when I get the two teams together and they start asking questions together and looking at risks together. Wow, you can really take off then if you start training your folks down that way.
Yeah, and Eddie, you started out with the why question, right? As you put your manager in the car and you're having that conversation. Tim, you're
Yep.
doing the same thing, right? Part of what you do and the framework and services you provide are the why questions.
You betcha.
So, Eddie, here's a question for you from your account manager standpoint, people that are managing the customer relationship. What is your expectation for them? What should they be thinking about, asking about? How should they be positioning DSI in that world? And then, Tim, I'll pivot back to you for maybe some tips and tricks that they could start to think about.
I think it really starts with knowing that every situation, every property, every risk could be potentially different. And it starts with that awareness. Again, having that tool in the toolbox when you're going through and looking at the overall risk profile of a property or of an account, and knowing that we have certain internal controls. We're talking a lot about end users and customers, but obviously we have to have internal controls that can impact our
Right.
customers as well. We could do a whole webinar just on that. How do we make sure that we're positioned from a business continuity standpoint where we're not shut down?
Right.
I mean, just think about that nightmare for a minute. Everything that we do is so dependent upon technology and the security universe, people clocking in, people getting paid, people getting invoiced. If we don't have a business continuity plan, so that's part of being a good partner as well. And I'm not going to say, because a lot of my colleagues on the webinar will certainly keep me honest here, it's not an avalanche right now, but we're starting to see end users start to say, wait a minute, do you guys have a plan? Do you have an internal plan?
Yes, sir.
Right.
And your first thought may be, what concern of that is yours?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
huge concern, because guess
Right.
what?
Right.
If my company goes down, I don't have well-trained, motivated, professional security officers showing up at your site.
Right.
Again, we've already have a list of what I'm not an expert in, but I will take a stab at this and say, no officers, your security profile dips a little bit when you don't have someone there at the front
Yeah.
door. So we have to do that. But from an awareness standpoint, being willing to have those conversations with the customer, just like in that scenario that I shared before, that wasn't to make anybody look bad, but
Right.
that's when you step up and go, hey, is there a better way to do this?
Right.
Can we sit down? Because we want to be a better partner. This woke us up. This may have been done for convenience. And by the way, I'd be lying if I said that's the first time I've seen that. I've seen it a million times.
Right.
I've walked into so many guardhouses and I've seen on the bulletin board, here's the password for the login system.
Stop.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's not that we're going to come in and say,
Yeah.
hey, this is crazy. I can't believe you're doing this. Sit down and say, this is a vulnerability. So we have to start to train our people. And one of the things that we have to get over as an industry is, let's face it, a lot of guys are like me. We still think our mission is no one gets in that door. That's still part of the mission. That's still a very important part of the mission.
Right.
But we also have to expand our thinking that nobody gets in that door, but also nobody gets in your network.
Excellent. Excellent. Tim, without too much of a deep dive,
Yeah.
next slide, please, by the way. This is all about how to connect the dots for me. When I see our customers that might have video monitoring or access control or do work in different verticals, right? Whether it's commercial high rise or stadiums, whatever it is, if you can trigger some events. I was reading, I think I mentioned to you guys early, I wondered where the term Internet of Things came from. And it goes back to also to 99 from MIT. And I was reading the definition. It was basically the internet is going to connect the physical world with sensors and data. And it seemed like such an easy comment. Seemed like I could have written it, but as you know, that had a far-reaching and much deeper impact. So if you could just take us through, whether it's access or video, et cetera, some cavalcade, some domino effects of things that you have seen and how they're connected in those particular security profiles.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll go through one example that happened here in Canada that was interesting, that may showcase a few issues
Sure.
with interconnectivity. There was Rogers Telecommunications, one of the largest telecom providers here in Canada. And they suffered an outage that impacted the 911 network in Canada, that impacted 30% or more of Canada, of subscribers, businesses, etc. What would your guard force members do at a location if they couldn't reach 911?
Right.
That's horrific. But what it was, the cascading impact was somebody conducted an update in real time on a production system and launched it. And it wasn't a really great update. And then it just cascaded to the impact where that they actually had to declare an event from within the Canadian government, which is rare to declare.
Right.
And it was that impactful because it was over 30% of Canadians couldn't access 911. And that included a good hunk of businesses, a lot of governments, hospitals, even police departments were unable to accept 911 calls from outside of the organization.
Wow.
That's
Tim, not to, I don't think anyone's insulated from it, but if you were picking, we just came back from ISC. I saw both of you gentlemen there, and you couldn't swing a dead cat without seeing something related, right, to AI and to cyber. It just was everywhere. It was omnipresent as we were walking the floor. And so as we see this ramp up to virtual guarding and video guarding and access control, right, with lots of acquisitions and lots of frothy opportunity on the access control side, what should our people start to think about? What might be a process by which, other than calling you up after the webinar and saying, hey, I got to start to prepare my company? What would that look like for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's go back to some of the building blocks of, Eddie mentioned it already, is I've spent a lot of years talking about enterprise security risk management, or ESRM, and we've tried to make it as sock puppet simple as we can. So we look at 4 boxes, and it starts off with understanding the goals and objectives of the business. So as a provider to an organization, that's one of the first things we need to understand is what are we there to help the business do? Then what are the assets that the business needs to have in place every day? And that may be this physical security controls like cameras, card access systems, gate control, etc. Understanding what those assets are, who owns them, and how do they connect and support the business. Then it's our job as security professionals to understand what's the risks that are impacting that. And it could be everything from a really bad patch to Eddie's example where somebody walked away with the password for the administration component. And how do we get better at that? But as you work through those different scenarios, your goal then is to come up, what's the strategy to mitigate the risk? And that needs to be a collaborative approach between you, your team members, and your client as well, so that they understand that they're working with you to become part of the solution and become resilient. So this way it becomes very much a team approach to understanding what are the risks and then what are the plans to put into place with you and your clients so that you create a more resilient environment.
Right. Next slide, please. I tell this story, Tim. I heard it firsthand from the security director at the Bank of America when I think it was Hugh McCall was the CEO, who I believe was a Marine. And he was walking a client to their car, came down from billing in Charlotte, forgot his credentials on his desk, went to go back and enter the building. And this very bright security officer said, I'm sorry, I can't let you in. And the person with him, his aide, said, do you know who this is? And he said, yeah, I do. It's the CEO of the bank. And he doesn't have his credentials. And of course, he later promoted that guy and gave him a bonus check, which was terrific. But that leads into my question, which is soft targets. Where are these soft targets today? And I don't mean the vulnerability. I mean less about the physical target in terms of what the vulnerability looks like. Where are we just every single day where we look and say, don't click on that? That's one. Are there other soft targets that our security owners, leaders, practitioners should be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the staff members as well. It's the executive assistants and the folks supporting the senior leadership, as well as senior leadership in the, the physical security or the management company, managed services company. Those are all targets as well. Social engineering targets and social engineering attacks have picked up in the last 5 years or more. As soon as somebody gets promoted, changes position, etc. And me personally, I've seen that myself. As soon as I started my own company, holy smokes, the amount of emails I got, the targeted scams that were coming my way because I was a founder and CEO. That's where most of the bad guys who want to break into systems appreciate that the weakest link is always the human. And the first target point is going to be trying to compromise the human first, so that I get you to click on that link or open up that SharePoint file, etc., so that then I can launch a more technical attack inside the environment. But it starts with the human. And that's where it's on us now to start training the human to respond better to the types of threats that we're facing.
Right. Eddie, you have a very big cross section of different kinds of clients that do different work, whether they're manufacturing facilities, on and on and on. You know your customer footprints. Are there any specific industries that you're finding are leaning in heavier to you? Are there any specific client sets, geographies, or otherwise that are a little bit more progressive in wanting more from DSI with regards to understanding what this threat looks like and how you're preparing them for it?
Yeah, I think, one of the things we're seeing is obviously the ones that are more dependent upon technology in their manufacturing processes, certainly in the way that they record and file things, just like incident reports. A lot of times we will leverage, software that you're very familiar with that we use, but we may be sending it to them. Or we may have not just personnel, but maybe we're having video analytics that we're installing as well. So there's an increased awareness in those environments because they understand, sort of to Tim's point, that the holistic view of what this risk looks like, and also what can happen if there's a failure in some of those situations. So we're seeing an increase. In fact, I look at a lot of bids in a given week, and I'm seeing more and more with a information security questionnaire. And I can tell you when I first started seeing those, they were about 2 questions.
Yeah.
List here, this and that. And now it can be 5, 6, 7, 8 questions of very, very detailed, not just, hey, yeah, we do antivirus software. We're okay. Don't worry about us. Getting down to what do you actually have? So we see a lot of technology dependent customers knowing that if we were to go in and impact their system, or conversely, we were to go down, what a huge impact that would have on them. I had a conversation with a customer about 2 weeks ago around this very topic, and he told me that if we were, cause some kind of vulnerability, and thankfully this was not a real scenario, we were just talking about it in theory, making sure that we all had our ducks in a row. Per hour, they were looking at about $850,000 that they would be
Wow.
down if they had to shut down just one section
Wow.
of this
Wow.
manufacturing plant. And so when you talk about what the impact is, what kind of
Right.
loss we could cause. So
Yep.
we're seeing that increase in not just sophistication, but, back to Tim's point, getting everyone together. And I'll go back to the example that I used about the person having the password that's at home doesn't work for us anymore. It's easy for me to ride in on the white horse and go, well, that's stupid. Well,
Yeah.
everybody knows that. The
Right.
real work begins when you have to sit down and go, okay, smart guy, what do
Yeah.
we do to mitigate
Right.
that?
Right.
Yeah.
That's when you have to
Exactly.
dig in and go, well, okay, great question. I know it's more convenient to have a general login. Maybe we have everybody that has their own login. Well, we got to buy 10 more licenses. It costs X.
Right.
Okay, well, maybe so you have to be willing not just to point out that's wrong, but to sit down and try to work through that. So we're seeing an increase really throughout all of our customer bases. Obviously, healthcare, technology, they've got an increased appetite for that conversation, but it impacts everybody.
Interesting.
Agreed.
Interesting.
Agreed.
Tim, where do you see any particular verticals? I mean, I think of obviously critical infrastructure, right, as
You bet.
as an obvious target, water supplies, things of that nature, utilities, energy, etc. Any particular stack ranked in terms of ones that might be investing more heavily, looking for greater expectation on that side?
I think you nailed it, Jeff, on the critical infrastructure, because there's such a interconnectivity between third parties, contract teams, et cetera. In the spaces where I've been in critical infrastructure and oil and gas and power transmission, our expectation for contractors is similar to what Eddie talked about. No, you actually are going to step up to this level of security. We now require you to be able to do these things. And now you
Right.
need to demonstrate to us that you have these programs in place, particularly when we were giving access to either the production facility itself to upgrade machines, software, et cetera, or at the far end of it to help us with, addressing inventory issues, supply chain management, et cetera. So Eddie's nailed it. Over the last probably 5 to 10 years, some of those areas, particularly in like pharmaceutical and production manufacturing, in
Right.
part of what we're seeing for oil and gas and in power distribution, water treatment, because of the sensitivity of the systems, because of its impact to the population. Can you imagine what would happen if a third-party supplier allowed access to a water treatment plant and changed the chemical structure? Because that's already happened.
Right.
Right? And it only got caught because the systems were in place to actually read the flow of chemicals coming into the water tanks before they were to a point where it got critical. But that shows how interconnected we are, and this concept of single point of failure exists if we're not part of that equation working with our clients. It's like if we're not sitting down with them, collaborating with our clients, understanding what our role is in protecting their systems and the expectation of us to keep our systems secure, it leads to those single points of failure, or we become the place where the attacker is targeted first and then go into our client's environment.
Eddie, I can see people rolling their eyes as they get to accountability, right? Because that's when it gets a little wonky, right? No. What do you mean? Eddie, I've used you've been my vendor for 7 years. Since when did we not? So tell me an accountability story and how that's getting a little, and you can put your lawyer's hat on or take that one off, doesn't matter. What matters is expectation, right? So there's customer and client expectation, and then there's what happens when the dance starts, who's paying the bill. So give me a little bit of flavor for this accountability challenge for physical security owners now.
Yeah, I say quite often the time to find out who's accountable is not when somebody's looking to find someone accountable. You have to know that up front and
Right.
know what risk you're taking on, what risk you're mitigating, or you're transferring somewhere else. And
Right.
there's a lot of stories and situations that I've been through, but one that really was a stark wake-up call. It's been several years back in a healthcare environment, and we've talked a lot about hacking and technology and phishing and spear phishing, but there still is just a good old-fashioned physical vulnerability of somebody
Right.
getting in the facility
Yeah.
and actually accessing a system that way.
Right.
And that was one of those situations where we had a healthcare campus where someone had gotten away with just tons of data that included very, very private and potentially damaging information, date of birth, social security numbers, patient names. And where I first got brought into it was a call from an attorney saying, hey, just FYI, this is happening. And we've also been able to track down that I forgot how many thousands of names were on that list, but there were several hundred that they had had vehicles purchased in the names of these patients. And while we're talking, of course, I'm thinking, I know he's not calling me just to tell me this, just for future reference or to learn from it. And
Right.
so at the end of the conversation, he said, by the way, you're going to be getting a letter
Right.
just to basically put you on notice that you could have an identification obligation if we find out that your officers did not
Right.
follow protocol when it comes to access control in this facility.
Right.
Because at that point, they did not know who actually was stealing the information. Was it a third party? Thankfully, when I say thankfully for us, it was certainly a
Right.
bad situation for our customer. They were able to determine that it was an actual employee that did it, but there was some speculation. Did we let someone in this sensitive area? Did we not lock a
Yeah.
door? Did we give a visitor pass with the wrong credential? And so that was the first time my eyes were open that, wow, that liability chain, that accountability chain, forget the legality of it, can
Right.
go beyond just somebody broke in the door and stole some product. It can go
Right.
into systems. And unfortunately, we're going to be seeing much more of that, not just on the legal side, but just when it comes to customer service. Hey, you were supposed to protect this as well. So we have to be aware that we have a responsibility, and we can get into, shifting risk and contractual provisions, all those kind of things. But it goes back to that partnership and knowing that our accountability doesn't stop at just locking the gate and locking the door. It can extend beyond that.
Right. Great point. Great point. Next
Yep.
slide, please. So, Tim, I asked you, I think, in the pre-questions, I think about people that are financially responsible for risk, right? And insurance companies always come up. That's always and by the way, and my buddy, I hope John Black is listening, but tell me a little bit about what that means, what you've done career-wise and risk mitigation side in cyber world with insurance companies and how that might play into a strategy.
Yeah, no, good question. So we chatted about this briefly, but many years, and Eddie can pitch in here as well. For many years, the filling in forms for cyber security or cyber insurance was pretty straightforward. You could probably get it done in an hour in an afternoon, and that wasn't, that was work at the time. Fortunately, things have gotten a little more complicated. The last time I had to fill in cyber insurance forms, we were asking for quite a bit of coverage, so we had to actually go to 3 different insurance providers when I was at this municipal government here in Canada, and it took me a month to get through those forms. And honest to God, I would rather go through a very detailed personal medical examination than go through that ever again in my career. It has been, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm sure the insurance folks are lovely people, but the work that they were asking us to do, and it wasn't just, do you have passwords? How often are they changed? Can we get a screenshot of the policy? And when's the last time that the policy was actually out of enforcement? All of those, it was the equivalent of an audit. So insurance companies have actually gotten smarter over the years. I've worked with some over the past as well doing audits. And what they've understood is that the blanket coverage they used to give years ago doesn't exist anymore. Liability now is being very narrowed down to if you have or do not have. And there's no guarantees you're going to get full payment on all of your claims as well, because they want to make sure that you are actually enforcing the program that you've designed, that the controls are in place and operating effectively, and you can demonstrate the efficacy of the control in advance of getting your cyber insurance policy. That's an awful lot of work. And that's a lot of work for a small company. I am going to be going through that same process here in about a couple of months for TaleCraft Security. Is even though we're a smaller company, we still need to have that insurance in place. And now we have to have controls to demonstrate that we're here to protect not only ourselves, but the clients that we work with as well.
Yeah, I mean that, and you nailed it. For small companies, this is the discussion, right?
Yeah.
A lot of our guests today look and say, well, that's not me. I can't afford that. That's only for the big guys. Well,
but no, but you really need to have it, right? Like it is part of your risk mitigation program. It's part of how you remember, like we always have those opportunities to help us offset risk. Insurance is one of them, but it means we need to do our homework. And that means we have to level up our game when it comes to our approach to securing our systems within our companies.
Right. Eddie, this leads to something near and dear to yours and my heart, employee training. As you know, I really try to work hard at having opportunities where we can raise the level of our industry, and anybody that thinks you're going to do that without training your staff is sadly missed the boat. So if you can, Eddie, tell me anything that you're thinking about, what you've deployed already, and what might be an opportunity to bring your employees along the journey. Because after all, as I said, that they are the frontline associates that are reducing that risk opportunity.
Yeah, when it comes to training in general, there's always two hurdles in our industry. And number one is, how do you get it out there? Turnover being what it is. And just example, our company, we have about 5,000 employees from coast to coast. So the first hurdle is, how do we get the right information using the right method? And then the second hurdle is always, is there a comprehension? Is it absorbed? We've all sat through a lot of training just to check a box. Hey, I've done that myself quite a bit. So how do we make sure there's comprehension? But going back to the first point, this is an area where subject matter and accuracy of information is hypercritical. Now that's true of all training. But, we were talking a couple of days ago about how it has changed so much. I can remember training our people like, hey, if you get an email from me, just hover over with your mouse. And as long as it says Sorrells@dsisecurity.com, hey, click on it until you can't click anymore. It's fine. It's no big deal. I would not dare tell anyone that now, because it's gotten so sophisticated. Not to really start to plant seeds of fear, but we used to tell people, and sort of still do, hey, if it's a telephone call, or, that means it's totally legit. So you can go with that. Now we're seeing, my biggest recommendation is, don't fly blind on this. Get with the experts, find people that have training. And here's another challenge, just like everything in our industry, it's going to change rapidly. So have a good partner that you can go to and say, I need to train frontline security officers, management, whatever the situation may be. What are some key points that I need to hit? Obviously, the social engineering, making sure that you never give out your passwords. These sound very simplistic, but they're not when you have somebody on the phone saying, but I'm with DSI Security's IT department. You're about to get a text with a 4-digit code. Give that to me so I can reactivate your account. Oh, great. What could go wrong? So finding the right information to put out there. And then also, and we've got some really good partners that help us out with this, where We will even do some simulated testing, which that can be a double-edged sword as well, because you can get fatigue a little
Right.
bit. But we have a very transparent, and I won't out the person on the call, but the last time we did it, everyone passed except a very senior executive that clicked that, well, hey, it said my password was expired and time to renew.
Right. Right.
Thankfully, that was the good guys that did that. So it has to be weaved into your culture.
Yeah.
Right.
And I've seen some, people that just go, hey, we got to do this because the insurance company says you got to do it. But it's got to be meaningful. There's got to be the right information. There's got to be comprehension.
Right.
And just like safety culture that I mentioned before, if you do it one time 12 months ago, it's gone. It's
Yeah.
got to be front and
Yep.
center.
Yeah.
That-
Next slide, and perfect segue, Tim. If someone leaves this webinar, which I hope they do, and I hope they engage you and your firm, but tell them if they were looking for partners, anybody who that might be, you're in the selection process. Tell me the things they should be thinking about. I leave here, I'm inspired. Eddie and Tim, you guys did a great job. Thank you. I'm all in. I'm going to run down the hallway. People are going to look at me a little funny, but when that process starts, what should they be thinking about? What are the questions they should ask? What should they be mindful of? Because I think this is an important strategic decision that any company is going to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you are providing a service to a customer, you can actually demonstrate how well you've absorbed this information, or how you want to use this as part of a way to differentiate in the market by demonstrating what you have done to increase your cybersecurity posture. How are you working with clients to understand the risks and the work that you do on their behalf, and how that's part of now the overarching risk program at the client site? What's your opportunity for resilience? How do you as an organization, how will you respond if an event occurs? How will you respond if an event occurs at your client's site? And then how do you want to work together with your client? Can you demonstrate compliance against different types of standards or different types of requirements and regulations? And then how do you actually make sure that your program stays up to date and you can reflect that back to your clients as well? All of these are things that we need to start looking at changing our behavior and our understanding of where we fall within this. It is now considered an enterprise risk. It isn't just cybersecurity and physical security.
Right.
I don't look at it as two silos anymore. No, it's security risk either facing your organization as a provider, or the risks that you want to make sure you don't incur to your client from the work you're doing on their behalf.
Tim, are there subsets of cyber? So I'm going through, I happen to work in the Midwest, to give you a physicality. I happen to work in, let's just call them HOAs or car dealers. If you were having me do an assessment and I'm looking for that perfect cyber partner, are there certain subsets? Well, you should look for this, which means that would correlate to more of an IT perspective. Are there certain subcategories of cyber when I'm out looking now for partnerships and vendors to support my initiatives?
You betcha. So depending on the industry that you're in, you want to work with a cybersecurity partner who understands your silo, your industry, your segment, and can also understand what legislative and regulatory requirements you have to comply with, and what are the privacy requirements as well that you need to have in place. And they should be able to understand what are the impacts to your organization if something occurs, and how can they help reduce the impacts. So those are the first set of questions that I would do with every vendor that would come through my door. I want to make sure that they're able to provide me ongoing iterative updates to the risk posture and work with me in a collaborative method to create what I would consider to be a joint security program between me, the client, and them, my provider of services.
Yeah, this is not a one and done.
No, it can't ever be, right? Like
I've
heard this before too. Securities and we're secure. Wow, really? Okay, that's awesome. Because 40 years in, I haven't found a secure company yet, but it's understanding that it really becomes a cultural change as well, is that we need to embrace a different mindset of looking at this. And we should expect our clients to ask these questions. And if they don't, you should be able to provide to the client that you've thought of these questions, and here's how we want to respond. That to me that's a way to demonstrate really in the marketplace that you're looking at security from a different lens now.
Super. So I'm going to bring Kelly back to us because I think we have 10 minutes left, which should be enough to hopefully handle some questions. I always say the same thing. If questions come in and we don't answer them here, we will make sure to send them to our subject matter experts and get you an answer. So
Yes.
Kelly, you have anything that's sitting in the queue you'd like to?
Yes. Thank you so much to the three of you. Really great discussion, great insights. We do have a few questions. This is now your time to submit a question. One of the first ones that came in was human error remains one of the biggest vulnerabilities in both cyber and physical security, from misconfigured systems to delayed responses. As AI becomes more integrated into surveillance and monitoring, do you see it playing a role in reducing these human-induced gaps?
Wow.
Ooh.
Right? AI, this could be a
Oh.
whole webinar.
Oh my God. Tim, let
Holy.
me start with you and then we'll kick it to Eddie because that has two.
I thought you were going to
that is
start with
two,
Eddie
right?
first. All right. So,
Yeah, I'm taking the pressure off Eddie. So I figured you would be the front runner and Eddie can come in behind.
so okay. Yes, I think AI can play a part. Absolutely. But the caveat is, how are you going to protect the AI? Right. So, and don't get me wrong, I think AI is a fantastic tool. I use it myself. It's just there's a lot of Acme Corporation now in ChatGPT because I'll never use a client name or my own, right? I'm always going to use write something for Acme Corp. The trick with AI, let's understand what it can and cannot do. From my perspective, AI has always been the same as we started back in the 40s with computing. There's an input, a process, and an output. Those three things haven't changed for getting closer to 80 some years now. AI allows us to do things a lot faster, look a lot prettier, and be more precise in some of the comments. Until I go upstairs and ask my wife, "Hey, can you help me out with some code on AI?" And then she says, "No, I can't. It's always wrong." And I'm like, "Okay, great, perfect." What I would like to recommend is, if you're going to look at that, can you contain what you're going to put as an AI engine so that it stays only within your property or only for that client? That'd be the first one. And second, make sure that if you are going to use systems like large language modules and AI, that you understand the limitations of what that can and cannot do. It's not going to go and it's not going to replace the guard force members at DSI. It just isn't. But what it can do is speed up the decision process and provide you greater data to make a better business decision. And if you look at it from that lens, yeah, it can speed things up for you. You bet.
Yeah, and by the way, Kelly, you're right. It is a whole other webinar for sure.
Oh,
But
yeah.
Eddie,
Yep.
I'm
Yeah.
sure whether it's you're doing bid proposals, marketing materials, post orders,
Sure.
or right
Yeah.
now John Black is cringing again. But could you share any of that with us, please?
Yeah, first of all, do not fill out a cyber application using AI. You will not get
Oh, please,
coverage.
yeah,
So,
please, yeah, no, please don't. Yeah.
John, if you are listening, that'll hopefully calm your nerves. But yeah, coming off of ISC West, there was a lot of conversation about the use of AI, and what I was particularly interested in of how that can be leveraged, as the person asking the question sort of insinuates there. How can we use that to do some of these things that can be done better through technology?
Right.
AI monitoring of cameras, for example. The old
Mhm.
model is, I'm sitting here, I'm staring at this camera, I'm making sure that Jeff doesn't walk in the room. If he does, and I've got to take action. One of the partners that we use actually won an award at ISC West for this very model. Having the AI enabled cameras that can do things better than a human can do.
You bet.
Right.
That is happening a lot, and we have to embrace that. To Tim's point, you have to always keep two things in mind. Are you exposing yourself to other risk, i.e. somebody now that can get in that system? But number two, you have to know the limitations of that. Again, for example, robotic assistance devices won the award for something called Sarah. It's something
Yeah.
that we're going to be utilizing down the
Totally.
road. But we also have to be looking at when that AI is exhausted, for example, there still is going to be needed that human element. And what is that response? It could be something as simple as validating that the AI did something correctly, or it could be where AI says, okay, I've told this person to leave 3 times, now it has to be escalated.
Right.
So it's going to revolutionize our industry, but we have to know the limitations, and we have to make sure that we're not exposing ourselves to other cyber risk.
Yeah, great. Kelly, we have time for one more, maybe
Yeah,
two more?
let's do one more. It's kind of the, we'll just go with this. Sounds like Chris
Sure.
was actually listening. It says, what is one major thing a facility can do to enhance the physical security of their cybersecurity infrastructure?
Eddie, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's getting, as Tim said very well earlier, getting all the relevant parties to the table, making sure that you have a contract provider, they're involved. And I'll use a quick analogy, but it still sort of shocks me that this used to be not a consideration. We used to have, end users, and it was our responsibility, getting back to accountability. It wasn't on the end user, it was on us, that would have emergency plans, active assailant response plans that we weren't even aware of.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you see that a lot with the cyber, where they're doing a lot of things, and that firewall, no pun intended, is still up going, well, they're contractors. They don't need to be in on. So
Right.
having that conversation, what I see a lot when it comes to vulnerabilities is they're also not accounting for every single person that's on their property. Even if they bring in the security force, you start to look at, well, the UPS driver has free access and the server room is right there.
Right.
Or,
Yep.
we're subcontracting out, 50 people because we're going through an acquisition. So they're going to be set up over here. Well, what are their password protocols? And they're contractors. We're not worried about them.
Right.
So really bringing
Yep.
all the parties to the table and getting back to ESRM, I would encourage you to look at ASIS resources. And again, Tim is a great guy to talk about that. How do you actually look at the entire risk? So to answer that question, you'd have to look at what is your risk profile.
Right.
If it's a very locked down facility, you may have most of the bases covered. If it's, hey, people can come and go and they have free range, you may have to sit down. And, as physical security guys, we look at crime grids. And the first question I ask is, how many people have gotten attacked and robbed? And,
Right.
you're okay with one guy, but that doesn't take into account the cyber. So really know your risk and get all the parties to the table.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, guys, I think we're rounding it out. I really can't thank you both enough for your generosity, for your thoughtfulness. Kelly and the team, great job. It's always really fun for me to do these because, as I said, I really pride myself on wanting to elevate our industry in any way that we can. And I think Trackforce gives me that opportunity. And I really thank you both very much for your time and thoughtfulness. We will funnel any questions to you all. Thank all of our guests for joining us, and you will certainly hear from our marketing team as a follow-up for sure.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
again, guys. Take care.